Welcome to Inspirational Leadership. I'm your host, Kristen Harcourt, and I'm excited for another wonderful guest joining us today from Vancouver. And we are going to be speaking with Rasie, who is a leadership coach, best-selling author, and speaker. And she helps businesses and corporate leaders lead their teams more effectively through self-leadership. She was born and raised in Sierra Leone and moved to Canada for a better future. She's the founder of RB Jumpstart Coaching and RB Jumpstart Mentorship. Welcome to the show, Rasie.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited to be here. And Rasie and I were talking just before we went live, and I said, with her last name, as she says it to me, she says it so beautifully. So I said, Rasie, I want you to introduce with your last name. So Rasie, say your full last name for us.
Okay. My name is Rasie Bamigbade.
One more time.
Bamigbade. And you know what's interesting, Kristen? There will be some Nigerians that might be listening to this and they're like, oh, she's totally not saying it correctly. But it's my last name, so I'm going to say it the way it rolls off my tongue, and we're just going to go with it.
I love it. So, Rasie, I always like to give people a chance at the beginning of the podcast to just talk to us a little bit more about your story, what got you to where you are right now. And you can bring us anywhere. So when you're starting to share your story, this could be back to Rasie when you were 5, or it could bring some of those poignant moments on the journey that got you to where you are now, because I think we're just so wired to connect through story. So I'm excited for our guests to get to hear a little bit about your story.
Yeah, for sure. And so I'll kind of go back all the way back to I was born in Sierra Leone, and I grew up there until I was about 11 years old. And one thing I always remember is my parents were very, very firm on you got to get an education. And that's something that was a foundation for me. And even to where I'm at right now, it's a very strong foundation they laid that I'm always learning. I'm always curious to learn from everybody, including my 4-year-old niece. I pay attention. What can I learn from her? That resiliency, right? So that Sierra Leone went through the Civil War, and so I moved to Canada from there. I lived in the Gambia previously for about 1.5 years and moved to Canada, went to high school here. And then I worked my way through the corporate ladder in McDonalds, Starbucks, Vancouver International Airport. And I have about 14 plus years of leadership experience. So I absolutely just love. I love self-leadership. I love walking the talk and inspiring and coaching other leaders to do the same in their line of work and at their pace.
Yeah, I love that. And when you think about, so I hear one of the things that when you were younger, learning was really embedded in how important it is to have that front and center in education. And I think there's some other times there's these milestones, there are these moments in our life that cause us to pause and take a step back and, really perhaps our world shifts and we start to see things differently. So I'd love to hear for you, what have been some of those milestones, or I'm even cognizant of using the words milestones because it might not be something that was necessarily that you were expecting to happen and you were looking forward to happening, which we kind of think of milestones perhaps as celebrations. But I guess we'll talk a bit more about some of those poignant moments on your journey.
Yeah, for sure. I can recall one thing right now is I wanted to be a doctor, right? Like with growing up, I always wanted that. My dad's a retired engineer. My mom's a nurse and she's still working. And all of my siblings have degrees, masters, they're still, some of them are still in school. But like when I finished grade 12, I realized I'm like, I don't know about post-secondary, but I like reading books and I like leading my teams and working as an operations manager at McDonald's. Let me see where this takes me, right? So that was like a realization for me that leadership is it. I didn't word it leadership then, but leading teams and helping people see their potential and they've never been aware of it. And just that light that comes up, right? Like that glow that you see, it's just very fulfilling for me. And I wanted more of that. Like I was very, I don't know, I'm going to use the word addicted, but I wanted more. I was like, give me more of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it sounds like even as you're talking about, you're getting lit up. As anyone who's watching, some of you might be watching this later on video. You can see Rasie is like totally lit up as she's talking about it. And that's when you know you're really using your gifts and your talents and you're in that zone of genius. And I know that self-leadership is something that's really important to you. And it's really important to me as well. I talk a lot about that on the show and with the leaders that I support. And also my overarching mission, which really is about humanizing work. And to me, part of that humanizing work is that self-leadership piece, because if that doesn't happen, you can't create as human environments because the leaders aren't doing the work as well. But I want to hear from your perspective. When you say self-leadership, what does that mean to you?
It's like putting myself first, in terms of my education, my learning, how I lead and how I show up in the world, how I embrace everything within me. So my truth, and even the things I don't like, the things I do like, and inspiring my team through my actions, and getting them to take action because of what they've seen and observed. Not necessarily what I'm saying, but what I'm actually doing in action. And it became like very apparent to me when I was working at Starbucks. So I got hired on as an operations manager. And usually when you get hired on, you go through all the different steps of training, barista trainer, supervisor, assistant manager, all of it. And while you're running at the store and stuff. And I remember this like thought just came to my mind. I'm like, oh, wow, I need to walk the talk more. And it's interesting. Like I had room to improve and talk in the walk. I liked my actions to show what I'm doing. And unfortunately, in terms of lacking that strength in talking the walk and kind of nervous when top leadership is around, I lost out on some opportunities. But again, that was a learning for me. Like, okay, you don't just walk the talk, but you also talk the walk as well. And share, because some people are not there consistently seeing your actions, that you need to speak up and be empowered to do that. And as a result, my team does the same as well. So it was like a whole rolling effect, just with that transition into Starbucks. It was a really cool experience. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? That conversation actually showed up with a client this week when we were talking about negotiating, and she realized that so often she's assuming that people are seeing what she's doing behind the scenes. And then she recognized, oh, actually, I need to be going there and telling people, because they're not in her day to day. They're not watching everything. The people who need to make the decisions in terms of compensation, moving up into other positions and promotions. And I see this a lot, even more with women from my experience. And I know there's actually a lot of research to support this, where many times men will be more likely to go and talk about the things that they're doing, whereas women sometimes will feel like, well, humility is about, they just see what I'm doing. I don't have to go over there and tell them what I'm doing. And it can be a lot of lost opportunities.
Oh, extremely. And I remember times in meetings where when I started to speak up, and I'd put my hand up, and I won't get literally my direct report would be looking around the room, anybody else? And I was like, what? But so it was like I was being too transparent and speaking I was that Black female speaking up and very empowered. So I needed to not let that be the reason why I stopped. I had to keep going, because I was like, ooh, okay, people feeling uncomfortable that I'm speaking up now. It's not my responsibility to make them feel comfortable. So let me continue this behavior, because I'm going to impact my teams And now I help my clients with that through it, right? Like that conversation with self, and then speaking up, and then empowering your teams to do the same. It's like a whole cycle effect.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, because I'm curious even around your experience as a Black female. Did you sometimes recognize times where you specifically felt like even more so you were holding yourself back based on some of the systemic things that happen within the system, right? Where, what was that experience like for you? How did you sometimes talk to other Black women to see what their experience was? What was your way of getting support and having community and talking through? Because you're right, like the onus isn't having to make other people feel comfortable. That's their work to do. That's not your work to do. But you also need to have somewhere where you have the support and resources, because it takes a lot out of you as well.
And there's this like one, like the muscle of asking for help. That's something that I needed to learn how to do. Just like in terms of you asking with, where do I go for support? Like, who is my community? I remember getting feedback from a direct report, because someone on my team was like, oh, Rasie's being too assertive. And it's not necessarily coming down like tougher on that individual, but I speak assertively. Like I speak with a lot of passion. And when that comes through, sometimes it could be intimidating, and it's not my intention. So I actually had to kind of like shift my style of speaking, depending on who my audience is. And also like checking in, like, hey, what's your take from what we just discussed? Making sure like that's understood. And also doing like a roundtable of with my team, like, hey, I'm not going to take this personal, but let me know, what do I need to do better to be better? And I remember sweating, and I'm like shaking. It's like, why am I doing this? What am I doing this? I don't need to do it. Let me back up. But I was like, no, I need to do this because I need to do better. I need to support my team. And, but it was like, actually, one day I got introduced to like a different manager that I was reporting to. And just the way she showed up, her name's Enid. And she just showed up authentically, and she'll laugh out loud, and she had like her body wraps, and she just spoke to everybody, anybody, and she was like the same all the time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I could show up just as I am, you know? And because I had a moment where I was like, a direct report said to me, you need to not laugh out so loud in meetings, like it's not professional. And I was like, kind of took off guard, and like, why can't I laugh out loud? So I kind of tone it down a bit. And then when I met Enid, I was like, oh my goodness, I can bring out my sense of humor. I can say my ridiculous jokes, like while I'm leading my teams and stuff. They can laugh at me. That's okay. I'm having the blast of my life. But yeah, that's where I started leading in my truth and really embracing, this is who I am. And this is what I have to offer within my environment to my teams. Let's just do that. Let's just lead in our truth. And it just brings out a whole different type of joy, like from the core.
Yes. I mean, what a great example of what authenticity really looks like, right? Because that's what it looks like to bring your whole self to work.
Yes.
Because it is exhausting to actually, like, you naturally want to laugh and then to be holding yourself back. It's like you're holding a piece of yourself out away from people. And you know, Brene Brown does a lot of work around this in terms of armoring up, right? You're not being who you are, and people naturally connect more to who you are when you're showing up authentically. And those people who are saying, oh, too much laughing, again, that's their work, because there's something that it triggers in them, because maybe when they were little, they were told, stop the laughing, we need to be serious. And so for them to see that, it's bringing up it's triggering them because they didn't have the permission, and perhaps they authentically actually want to laugh more too.
Yes.
So interesting.
And what I love, Kristen, is like the energy that we give out when we're in that space, right? It's sometimes you don't even have to speak, and you just pull people in just with, you know, just a picture or a smile or just one sentence that you type in a message, and just like the feedback you get from the other end. Or for instance, if I'm walking down the street and I look over and smile at someone that's walking on the opposite end, and they just have this big smile back and they're like, thank you. And I was like, what? This is so awesome. I just want to feed more of this, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of that story actually, when I was doing the commute pre-COVID and pre me having my own business. So about 5 years ago, and I would go from where I am in the suburbs to Toronto and be taking the GO train. And, there's a lot of adulting and serious business that happens in the GO train, right? Like everyone's like, we're off to our jobs, like no smiling. And then especially even walking from the offices, I would just see all of these people who just look quite miserable and unhappy. So I was like, well, my goal is I'm just going to be around there smiling all the time, to the point that I think I was doing it so often that I didn't even realize I was smiling. And then the person would all of a sudden smile back and be like, oh, I guess I'm smiling. I didn't even realize I'm doing it. I had built that muscle. And I believe, like, I think that, and I really love that was happening for them in the morning before they started the day, because I think it can shift their energy as well, because a smile and showing up as who you are and not feeling like you have to hold yourself back. And sometimes that might've looked like I'm having a conversation with a stranger in the train too. And so many great dialogues happened because we're humans who want to connect with one another. And sometimes that means being a bit courageous and being curious and doing something that might feel a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it's so necessary. We absolutely need that connection. We need it.
We do. So I'm curious for the self-leadership piece. When you think about the different leaders you've worked with, either when you're doing your training or when you worked one-on-one, what are some of the patterns that you notice around opportunities for growth when it comes to self-leadership?
The biggest gap is especially high performing leaders, that they take care of their team, but they lack that self-care, that self-love. And also I'd probably say like same for high performing leaders, they tend to, like they get to a point where they're like, oh, okay, I've done everything I possibly can, but I'm still not getting that result that I want, and because they're not looking at it from an objective view. And what I love, especially if I'm on a sales call, is I'll ask the questions, and this a prospect will tell me the answers, and I instantly know, okay, this is where we're going to start. And you can just see the glow and the light that just like comes through their eyes, like, oh, this is what I've been missing. And I think emotional intelligence it's a big gap as well. That's something that I've noticed with like every client I've worked with, is how they get in touch with their emotions. So that stillness, that vulnerability, that it's okay to laugh, it's okay to cry, it's okay to be upset about something, it's okay to be frustrated. And just, naming that emotion and staying still with it so you can discover more. And the reason why, like I chose, okay, I'm going to help my clients with this, because I was that leader that didn't cry. I will wait till I go home, and then I'll just like break down completely. I'll share with you a story actually. After the the fire in Fort McMurray in 2016, I went back and we reopened our stores in Fort McMurray, and Starbucks actually brought in a grief counselor, so like trauma counselor, to do a group work with me and my team. And Kristen, this like just threw me off. Like it came out of nowhere. I was not planning on crying. I'm like, I'm strong. I'm a strong Black woman. I got this. Like, I'm going to be there for my team. And so she's asking questions, but no one's speaking because, they're waiting for that one person to say something. And so I start talking about like what I've been feeling and what I've been carrying. And one of the parts of me asking, I always ask people like, how are you today? And I needed to shift that a bit. I needed to change that question because I was carrying a lot that I couldn't like physically and emotionally carried in my heart. I needed to like slow down and take care of myself first. So as I was sharing that, I started crying. And it was this deep cry, you know, the boo-boo cry that you're like, I don't want to do this in public. And the moment that happened, I remember one of my supervisors looked over. You are human. I was like, yes. It was crazy, but the outcome of that, like my team grew so much stronger together, and my team trusted me with crying in our one-on-ones because they're frustrated about something, they're going through something at home. I was able to create that safe space by just being vulnerable and allowing myself to feel. So now working with my clients and coaching them through that process is like, it's okay for you to feel your emotion. It's okay to be human, like as a leader, and you don't have to know it all. You can hire experts on your team to help your team get to where you want to be, those results, those goals, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you're talking my language. I mean, I love emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence and mindfulness and the presence piece, because my experience is so many leaders are leading from the head up. And so, yes, there's intelligence here. It's not going anywhere. We love our minds and the thinking and all that can happen from there, but they're not tapping into two other pieces of intelligence. They've got their heart and what can be happening. That also has intelligence. Our heart has a brain that's happening there. And then our body,
Yes.
which is so good at getting our
Yes.
attention. And a lot of the leaders that I'm working with, all of them are high performers as well. And so as high performers, they tend to be, we push through, we keep
Yes.
checking the doing.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like there's no time. I'm thinking of a movie where they said that there's no crying in baseball. Well, now it's like there's no time to
Yeah.
experience the emotion. So then they just keep pushing it down. And
Oh.
it's not that's not how we were designed, right? We're not supposed to be robots
No,
that are
we're
just pushing through things. And the human experience is to have those ebbs and flows.
yes.
And it's reminding me as well, when you're talking about that, I remember my son, my 9-year-old, telling me this last week, and he's been having some mental well-being challenges with everything going on with the pandemic and just some other personal challenges that he's had. And so he's actually a great role model of someone who's very comfortable releasing anger and very comfortable releasing crying.
Wow.
And of course, I encourage that. We
Yes.
want to figure out some healthier ways to release the anger, but the
Yeah.
sadness, like, great, release it, let it out. It's so good. But it was so interesting when he reflected back to me. So my goal as a mom has always been, okay, I want to stay calm. I want to stay centered. I want to support him. And he said to me the other day that he was crying, and he said afterwards, well, it doesn't really feel like you care about me because you're not crying when I'm upset. And I said, beautiful for him to reflect that back, because there's a part of him that felt, well, if the person's not crying like I'm crying, then they don't care. And it was such a beautiful reflection back. And, of course, I try to release. Sometimes it's just not there to be released in that moment. It might be a little bit later. But he even reflected, like, I don't see you cry a lot. And I thought, oh, there's probably times where if I am feeling overwhelmed, I might go into another room. Sometimes I need to stay in that room and cry with them, because then he doesn't see mommy as this person over here who doesn't cry.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I'm human and I cry too.
Wow, that's powerful. That's for a 9-year-old. That's a strong reflection.
Yeah. So I always like, the thing is, there's all this feedback that can be coming to us all the time. We just have to be open
Yes.
to listening and hearing, right? I wasn't getting defensive. Like, I can't believe, I'm like, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And for feeling comfortable enough to share what's on your mind. And I think what I hear you saying is that we also want to create work environments where that's happening, so that people are sharing openly and connecting human to human.
Yeah. Like, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and even that pause, right? That pause to like reflect before you pivot. It's something that I intentionally do, like through even my content on social media. Like all the content that I put out there, I put it out with the intention. I want my audience to pause, to reflect on this message and then pivot, because it's so important, especially when we're in the midst of you trying to make a decision. Just that, maybe sometimes the pause has to be 24 hours before you come to a conclusion. Okay, this is what I want to do. Because I think sometimes, especially in leadership, in corporate or in business, we could talk about like time, right? They were like, okay, time is not in my favor. And there's a power in planning ahead and saying, okay, I'm going to put this in my calendar at 12 p.m. every single day. I'm going to pause and just reflect on how my day's going. I'm going to pause and just reflect on what are the steps that I need to take to get closer to my goal.
Yeah, you're reminding me. I have a lot of clients where they put in, there's a couple of different apps. Mind Jogger is one. I don't use Mind Jogger because I have an Android. There's another one where you can have a notification that comes up. So I have one because I'm always working on mindfulness and presence and being in the present moment. So this actually comes from Conscious Leadership Group. They do a lot of work around this. And it says, what's here if there's no problem to solve? And like really sitting with that, like what's here right now if there's no problem to solve, because our head is always like, well, there's something else. Where are we going? What do I have to solve? But when you just sit in it and just say like right here in this moment, what's actually here? Presence. Like right now we can just be here and be in this present moment. And for me, it really works as an anchor to bring myself back. For some people, that question might look different, which is just like, where am I right now? Where am I? What might I need in this moment? And it might even be with your suggesting to have it saying pause, 6 or 7 times during the day, which also could be the pause could also be, hey, maybe we're going to do some mindful breathing for, don't be crazy, but maybe like 2 minutes. Because when you do that, then you come back to whatever else you were doing, it looks different.
It does. Yeah. Like I have, they just keep popping up, like go for a walk or drink water, look away from the screen. All these, and I know it feeds my energy, and I encourage like my clients to do the same or even more, or whatever works for them at their pace. Right. Cause it takes quite a few days to build that practice and to trust it. And in order to see the result, and then you keep feeding it. Because, okay, this is the outcome. I like this. I want more of it.
Yes. What you're saying reminds me of those rituals, because if you start to do those rituals outside of work, which sometimes that ritual might be okay, because with this online world and with not going into the office, a lot of people don't have those transition periods that they used to have. So they need to say like, okay, it's 5 o'clock if that's their time. I need to physically close my computer or close the office door. Or I know with some of my clients, they might, as they transition at the end of the day, might listen to music for a couple of minutes or a podcast or something. So when they're going from work to back to their personal, they have something to just get regrounded and transition before they're going back to back to their personal life.
Or like washing your face. Like that's something that I do. Like once I'm done for the day, I was like, okay, I was going to wash my face. And that's the indicator. Okay, we're going offline. It's almost like telling your nervous system, okay, we're going to slow down and we're moving to another place. I'm curious, when you think about inspirational leadership, because to me, that's what this podcast is all about. And a lot of the things that we've talked about today are about what it looks like to be an inspirational leader. But I'm curious from your perspective, if you're really thinking about, what are some of those behaviors that you see in an inspirational leader? What shows up for you? I want to say unlearning, because there's like, there's a lot of things, a lot of different skills that we're taught, like along our journey of leadership, either we're aspiring or in leadership. And we need to continue to unlearn and learn at the same time. And really coming from a space of curiosity. I think that's another great muscle to flex, like Wendy would say that, and Wendy Battles, and asking a lot of questions. And this is something that I work through with like my clients. You're coming from a place of curiosity, asking lots of questions, and really letting go of those assumptions. I think that actually it stumps our growth. Like it really just keeps you in one place and you're not able to pivot because you've already made an assumption. So that's what it is. On the other hand, if you come from a space of, hey, what happened here? Or what is this moment trying to teach me? Or what can I learn from this? Or what can I observe from my team member right now what can I learn from them today? And the next part, I'd say that intentional, being very intentional with the actions that we take when we wake up in the morning, setting the intention for the day, grounding ourselves even before interacting with the world. Yeah, those are definitely like the things that come up for me, like when I think of an inspirational leader, and definitely walking the talk.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk all about the values, and we have these wonderful, beautiful values that are written, but if we're not living and breathing those behaviors, then it's just an exercise. It's a checkbox, and it's not having the impact it's designed to have. One other thing I want to ask you about, because we were talking about this as well just before the podcast, is I know a lot of leaders, even especially right now, feel like from a productivity standpoint, there's so many demands that their container feels really full, pulled in all these different directions. And you were talking beautifully because you are someone who has a lot on your plate. However, you're very intentional around what's on your plate and how you're using your time. And so I know there's people listening right now who are asking themselves, how could I be more intentional and effective with my time? What shows up for you around that one?
Yeah, like I actually do monthly workshops on self-leadership skills. And it's called Self-Leadership Workshop Series, if our audience were to search that on Eventbrite. And I go through the what, the how of time. So making time for what adds value. So first of all, you need to know what you're spending your time on. If I don't know what I'm spending my time on, I can't exactly fix the problem or close any gap, right? So it's kind of like if you go to a store to buy a shirt and you just show up, you have no idea if there's money in your bank account or not. And you just show up like, okay, let me just take the chance. I think a lot of leaders are taking chances with the time. And also so that involves taking inventory. I take my clients through this tedious process. They don't like it, but it's very, very beneficial once they've completed. It's very eye-opening. You discover a lot of like what, like an example would be that scrolling. You have your phone and you're scrolling through either it's the news or the internet or posts and stuff. And you realize it's 2 hours gone by because, Rasie said, take inventory of my time. And I just found 2 hours right there that I can just spend 5 hours and be intentional of what posts I look at and what categories, and get your other hour and 55 minutes back and put that towards where it's going to add value. So it could be that spending time with your family because that makes you happy and it fulfills you. Or it could be spending an extra hour on your business because that's going to bring you more income. And the other thing as well that I encourage my clients to do, and I cover this in the workshop, is writing down the value beside like each task that needs to be completed. What does that look like? It could be time with family. It could be money. It could be like what you feel on the inside. So like literally writing all those down beside the task, why you need to do it, especially the ones that you don't like doing and you don't enjoy, and flexing the ask for help muscle.
So good, because I could see how outside of work, there could be lots of, well, inside of work as well, but there can be lots of numbing activities that are happening, which is not dealing with actually what's going on. And so, because your body is getting your attention, but you don't want to be with it. And then also within the workplace, there could be times, and I see this one a lot, especially as leaders work their way up in the organization and they're now in more senior roles, that they're doing too many things that are bringing them into the weeds that are not a good use of their time. And guess what? Some of those things they might have really loved. There might have been things that they loved as an individual contributor, but as people leaders, there's other things that are actually priorities right now. So I've had some clients do this as well, and I've done it for myself, and it's always enlightening.
Yeah. And it comes with that trust as well, right? Like you have to build that trust, and it comes with a lot of conversations that you have to have with your teams, and a lot of follow-up. It's and planning this in your calendar. Like, this is what I need to do. This is what it looks like as a bulk in the whole year. Let me break it down and go backwards of what that looks like so that I can reach that goal and that result. It is very time consuming, but it's necessary, right? Like, it's like, I've seen this somewhere, when you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. Yeah.
I say the same thing around, you have to take back your day instead of somebody else taking your day, right? Because there's a lot of where other people's emergencies and priorities become your emergency, but it really isn't. They frame it as an emergency, but it really isn't actually an emergency.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And an example too, like in 2021, so I wrote and published my book in about 60 days. I was very, very intentional about it. I hired a coach because I knew I needed a structure. I needed a higher accountabilities because I've been trying to do it on my own for years and never got past a chapter. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing here, but I'm writing words, but I don't know how to put it all together. And within that 60 days, I was writing my book. I was working a full-time job, and I'm growing my business. I'm like coaching 2 to 3 clients at a time during that period. And it's because of my inventory. I periodically take inventory of my time. I'm very clear on what my priorities are, like what is number 1, what's number 2 and number 3. And then everything else kind of like falls into place. There's some things that I needed to sacrifice, maybe I couldn't be on a call with my family for 2 hours. Maybe it's, I'm just on the call for an hour, and I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Right. And the thing is too, like with my coaching program, I don't coach my clients through things I haven't tried. So it's things that I've walked the talk, and I've seen what the results are. And then I honor their pace in them reaching those results, like on their own terms.
Yeah. So important. Rasie, as we start to wrap up today's conversation, are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave with the audience?
Yeah. There's 24 hours in each day that we all have, right? And a lot of times we see leaders, or we see successful business owners or entrepreneurs doing all these different things. And sometimes we wonder, like, how do they get to do all this and not burn out? And the beautiful part is, like, leaders can do a few things, making sure you're asking for help, flexing that muscle, because it's okay to not know what to do. It's okay to learn what to do. And sometimes you don't have time to do it, that you need to ask for help. And the other part is like delegating, getting your team involved. And this is for leaders that are leading teams, trusting your team, and the last part is like getting the right people on your team to support you with this. Because if you don't have the right people that are passionate about like the work, the mission, the values, it's tough to get to where you want to be. Yeah. So use the 24 hours wisely.
Yeah, such good advice. Rasie, where can people learn more about you and your work?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. And you can also search Self-Leadership Workshop Series. You can Eventbrite. And I do monthly workshops, and you can register for that to get an idea of like how I work and what is possible, like in terms of like my style and the results. That's where they can find me. And and also you can pick up my book, Lead in Your Truth. It's on Amazon. It is a bestseller. It includes real life examples of how you can lead more authentically in your leadership role.
Amazing. And we'll have all of that in the show notes. Rasies, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure, Kristen. Thank you for having me.
And to everybody, wherever you are in the world right now, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're sending tons of love.